On a night shrouded in mist, where darkness seemed to gather at every corner, Route 22 wound its way like a serpent in the shadows. What drives a person to venture down this deserted road, filled with stories whispered to the wind? What would compel them to ignore the warning of instinct and press on, even when reason screamed for them to stop? This was how Emily, a young dreamer and vulnerable soul, found herself on a journey that would challenge her deepest beliefs. Burdened with insecurities and a yearning for freedom, she felt drawn to the idea of escaping her monotonous, unexciting life. Route 22, with its headlights flickering like lost stars, offered a promise of adventure and mystery. It was a road filled with tales, some forgotten, others buried. Emily, living in a world where reality seemed increasingly unbearable, decided it was time to seek something beyond what she knew. What could be more terrifying than confronting one's own fears? What else could reveal the essence of life beyond death? On that fateful night, as she drove her old car, a 1970 Ford Mustang, the atmosphere shifted. Shadows danced around her, and the air felt electrified with a sense of anticipation. Emily did not know it, but what awaited her on that road was an experience that would challenge not only her sanity, but also the line between the real and the supernatural. As she passed a desolate stretch, something made her stop. A figure by the roadside, a young girl, seemed to be waiting for her, with a sad, distant look, as if caught between two worlds. The girl, with long, unkempt hair, wore a white dress that floated in the wind, as if made of clouds. As Emily approached, she felt a chill run down her spine, but could not resist her curiosity. "You need help?" she asked, her voice almost echoing in the solitude of the night. The girl simply looked at her, a melancholic smile on her lips. "Take me home," she replied, her voice soft as a whisper. Unaware that she was about to embark on a journey that would take her to the limits of what she thought she knew, Emily nodded and opened the car door. As they drove, the atmosphere inside the vehicle grew increasingly strange. The young girl seemed distant, as if in a trance, staring out the window, watching the trees rush by. Emily tried to make small talk, but the words slipped away like smoke. Time felt distorted. The clock on the dashboard spun, but the road seemed to stretch infinitely. A sense of despair began to settle in Emily's heart. "Where do you live?" she asked, trying to break the heavy silence. The girl's response was only an enigmatic smile. That was when Emily noticed that the road had become less familiar. The city lights were fading away, and the darkness seemed to deepen around them. She recalled stories she had heard about Route 22, about a young girl who had disappeared years ago, a legend of a ghostly hitchhiker seeking a home that would never exist again. Doubt began to gnaw at her mind, but curiosity and fear intertwined, and she couldn't stop asking herself, who was that girl? What happened to her? Finally, they arrived at an old abandoned house, shrouded in thick fog. The young girl gestured for Emily to stop. "This is where I belong," she said, her voice now sounding like a distant echo. With a tightness in her chest, Emily stopped the car and looked at the house, which seemed to have been forgotten by time. The windows were broken and the door swayed gently, as if inviting her in. "Wait here," the girl ordered, before disappearing into the darkness. Time passed, and Emily sat there, her heart racing. What was wrong? Why wasn't the girl coming back? Restlessness took over her, and after a few minutes that felt like hours, she decided to get out of the car and look for the young girl. The house was enveloped in an oppressive silence, and each step echoed like a scream in the void. Upon entering, she found walls covered in mold and furniture draped in white sheets, like ghosts waiting to be freed. As she explored, a sense of despair enveloped her. What did she hope to find? What if the legend were true? Fear consumed her, but curiosity pushed her forward. It was then that she heard a whisper, a familiar voice calling her name. The girl's echo reverberated off the walls, leading her to a room upstairs. The door was ajar, and a faint light emanated from within. As she entered, her heart stopped. The young girl was there, but not alone. Around her were images of other young girls, all with the same lost look, trapped in an endless cycle. Emily felt a deep terror as she realized that each of them was a victim of that road, a hitchhiker who never returned. The girl who had guided her there smiled again, but now it was not a smile of hope. It was a smile of despair and longing. "Now you are one of us," the girl said, her voice now dark as a shadow seemed to draw closer, enveloping Emily in a cold embrace. Reality began to unravel, and Emily realized that the freedom she sought was about to transform into an eternal prison. Route 22 was not just a road, it was a limbo, a trap for those who dared to challenge the unknown. And so, the young dreamer became yet another story to be told under the moonlight, forever trapped in the legend of the ghost girl of Route 22. Emily felt the ground tremble beneath her feet as the young girl's smile turned into something darker. Cold engulfed her, and a wave of panic hit her like a blow. She turned, trying to find a way out, but the walls seemed to close in around her as if the house were alive, consuming her from within. The silence that had once enhanced solitude now became deafening, and the feeling of being watched haunted her. It was then that she heard a distant laugh echoing through the dusty corridors. The laughter was that of children, a joyful sound that contrasted with the oppressive atmosphere. But Emily knew there were no children there. Her mind began to race. These laughs were an echo of a lost time, a memory of lives that should never have been forgotten. She needed to get out of there. With a desperate effort, Emily ran toward the door, but the house seemed to have changed. The corridors stretched on, and shadows danced on the walls, creating grotesque shapes that seemed to mock her. Fear momentarily paralyzed her, but the memory of the young girl who had lured her to that place pushed her forward. "Where are you?" she shouted, her voice trembling. As she veered around a dark corner, Emily collided with a figure. The impact made her stagger, and looking up, she found a worn-looking man with deep, sad eyes. He wore clothes from another time, as if he had stepped out of a nightmare. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice hoarse and filled with despair. "The house does not forgive." "Who are you?" Emily asked, trying to contain the panic that was beginning to overflow. "Where is the girl? She brought me here." The man shook his head, his gaze distant. "The girl is an illusion, a trap. She leads everyone who ventures down this road. Many have come, but few have returned." His voice trembled, and he glanced back, as if expecting something to emerge from the shadows. Emily felt a chill run down her spine. "What do you mean, few have returned? What happened to you?" "I am one of those who stayed," he replied, the despair in his eyes intensifying. "The house feeds on fear, and the more you fear, the stronger it becomes. You need to leave while you still can." She realized he was right. The house was alive, and the weight of its memories enveloped her like a web. But how to escape? The path that had once seemed clear was now shrouded in mist, and the laughter of children continued to echo, as if mocking her situation. "Go!" the man shouted, pointing to a door that seemed to materialize to her left. "Don't look back." Without hesitating, Emily ran toward the door, her heart racing. The shadows seemed to reach out to grab her, but she threw herself through the opening, her mind screaming for her not to look back. However, as she passed through the door, she found herself in a different corridor, a space that seemed endless, with worn wooden doors on either side. The man had vanished, and the feeling of being alone swallowed her once more. With a surge of courage, she began to open the doors, one after the other, each revealing abandoned, dust-filled rooms. Inside one of them, she found a diary, its pages yellowed and worn. As she flipped through it, her eyes widened at the accounts of other young women who had also been drawn to Route 22, stories of interrupted dreams and unexplained disappearances. One name stood out among the accounts: Catherine. It was the same young girl who had found her by the roadside. The words described how Catherine had disappeared after getting a ride, luring other lost souls to her tragic fate. Emily felt a knot in her stomach as she realized that Catherine was not just a victim, but also a guardian of the house, trapped in a cycle of pain and despair. With the understanding hitting her mind, Emily decided that she needed to find Catherine again. If she couldn't escape, maybe she could free the soul of the girl trapped in that house. With a new purpose, she pressed on, determined to face her fears. Each step she took echoed like a drum, and the atmosphere around her shifted. The laughter of the children was intensifying, now accompanied by whispers that seemed to call her name. Emily. Come play. She felt a shiver run down her spine, but didn't hesitate. The door at the end of the corridor, a faint glow emanating from its crack, seemed like her only way forward. When she opened it, she found herself in a garden shrouded in mist, where wilted flowers grew among ancient gravestones. The air was heavy with the scent of death and desolation, and there was Catherine among the shadows, her pale face illuminated by the dim light. "You came back," Catherine said, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "You shouldn't have come back." "I can't leave you here," Emily replied, determination growing within her. "I know who you are, and I want to help." Catherine hesitated, and a look of sadness crossed her face. "There's no help for me. I'm trapped, just like all the others. You can't break the cycle." "However, I can try," Emily insisted. "You don't have to stay trapped in this place. We can find a way to free you." The laughter around them began to intensify, and the atmosphere grew increasingly oppressive. Shadows clustered, as if the house itself was reacting to Emily's determination. "You don't understand," Catherine shouted, her voice now a lament. "The house won't let you take me. It feeds on fear and despair, and every moment you spend here, it grows stronger." It was then that Emily realized that the house was not only keeping Catherine captive, but was also trying to imprison her. The struggle was not just against the legend of Route 22, but against an entity that fed on pain and despair. The conflict intensified, and the reality around them began to dissolve into a chaos of shadows and light. "I won't give up," Emily declared, remembering what the man had said. "If you're trapped, then I will fight for you." The air around them began to vibrate, and the house seemed to tremble with the force of Emily's determination. Laughter turned into screams, and the mist thickened, forming a barrier between the two. But Emily did not hesitate. With a cry of challenge, she advanced toward Catherine, determined to break the cycle of despair that bound them. And so, amid the darkness of Route 22, the fight for freedom began to unfold. Emily felt the air around her becoming heavier, as if the house were trying to suffocate her. The distant laughter of children now echoed like cries of despair, and the shadows danced frantically, trying to envelop her in their cold embrace. Each step she took toward Catherine felt harder than the last, as if an invisible force was pulling her back. The young woman looked at Catherine, who stood among the gravestones, her expression caught between hope and despair. "You have to believe me," Emily shouted, her voice almost lost in the rising clamor around her. "There's a way out. Together we can break this cycle." Catherine hesitated, but the shadows surrounding her began to stir, as if they were alive, responding to Emily's determination. "You don't understand what's at stake," Catherine said, her voice trembling. "I'm part of the house now. If you try to take me away, you could get lost forever." Emily's heart raced. She felt the truth in Catherine's words, but she couldn't allow that to paralyze her. She remembered the stories she had read in the journal, Those young women who had gotten lost, whose voices echoed between the walls of the house like whispers of warning. "I can't leave you here, Catherine. You're more than just a shadow in this place." The laughter turned into cries, and a chilling wind swept through the garden, swirling dry leaves around them. It was a feeling of helplessness that enveloped her, but Emily refused to give in. She recalled the man she had met earlier, his warnings about the power of the house and how it fed on fear, and now she felt that the true battle was about to begin. As Emily approached, the house seemed to change. The gravestones began to lean, the engraved names distorting, as if they were twisting under the weight of forgotten memories. She remembered that Catherine was not the only one trapped. Other souls were there, and the echo of their stories mingled with her own. The weight of collective pain began to form into a vortex around her, sucking away her strength and courage. "You have to let me go," Catherine screamed, now with tears streaming down her face. "If you stay here, you'll become part of this too." At that moment, Emily felt a wave of despair wash over her. What was she doing? The idea of getting lost forever in the darkness of the house terrified her. Her heart raced, and anxiety tightened her chest like a noose. She realized that the house not only held Catherine captive, but also wanted to imprison her, feeding on the fear that was growing inside her. The ground beneath her feet began to tremble, and the shadows clustered together, forming indistinct figures that seemed to twist and move. A whispering voice, deep and dark, began to echo in her mind. "You don't belong here. This is your home now." Emily fought against the influence, trying to remember why she had come. "No, that's not true," she shouted, her voice firm. "I choose my freedom. I choose to help Catherine." The laughter turned into shrill screams, and the house responded with a roar, as if it were wounded by her words. The walls began to close in, and Emily felt the pressure around her, as if she were being crushed. She looked at Catherine, who was now surrounded by a dense fog, her eyes filled with terror. "I can't stay here," Catherine screamed, and Emily realized that the young woman was struggling against the very prison that the house had created. Time seemed to freeze, and the reality around them began to disintegrate into a chaos of shadows and light. Memories of other young women whose stories she had read began to invade her mind. They were not just victims, they were souls that had been swallowed by the house itself, transformed into guardians of an endless cycle of pain. What could be done to free them? Doubt consumed her, but deep down, she knew that the key to liberation lay in her own feelings, in her courage and determination. With a cry of challenge, Emily moved forward, ignoring the shadows surrounding her. She reached out her hand toward Catherine, who hesitated, but the connection between them was undeniable. "Together we can!" Emily exclaimed, the strength of her will manifesting in a light that seemed to cut through the darkness. Catherine looked at the outstretched hand, and for a moment she hesitated. The fear was palpable, but there was also a spark of hope. "You have no idea what you're doing," she shouted, but Emily's determination did not waver. "I know we can overcome this. Come with me." And in that instant, the young woman decided to believe. She extended her hand, and their palms touched. The impact was like a wave of energy, and the house shook violently. The shadows began to stir, and the laughter turned into screams of fury. Emily felt a powerful force enveloping them, and the house began to crumble around her. The faces of the lost souls emerged among the shadows, and the truth of their stories merged into a collective scream of liberation. But what had the house become? A labyrinth of pain and despair that kept her captive, a force that fed on fears. And now, she was about to face her greatest battle. The conflict intensified, and Emily realized that the fight for Catherine was, in fact, a fight for all the lost souls within that cursed house. And the true nature of horror became clearer with each passing moment. Emily and Catherine's hands touched, and the connection between them seemed to vibrate in the air, as if an electric current flowed through their souls. The house, which until then had been a labyrinth of pain, now trembled under the force of their determination. But amidst the chaos, something unexpected happened. A bright light emanated from their intertwined hands, filling the space with a pulsating energy that made the shadows momentarily retreat. However, the house would not yield so easily. A deep roar echoed, reverberating throughout the place, and the walls began to twist as if they were alive. The light that had surrounded them started to flicker, and Emily felt a darker presence approaching, a force that not only wanted to destroy them, but would also reveal hidden truths. "Emily!" Catherine shouted, her voice filled with terror. "I think we did something wrong!" The light began to dissipate and the darkness gathered again, forming an imposing figure that emerged from the shadows. It was a woman, shrouded in a black veil, her face covered by a mask of pain and despair. Her eyes glowed like embers, and the voice that emerged from her lips was a chilling whisper that resonated deep within the soul. "You are not the first to try to escape. This house feeds on hope, and now you belong to me." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. The woman's presence was oppressive, and the feeling of despair began to invade her heart once again. Catherine beside her was paralyzed, fear preventing her from acting. "Who are you?" Emily managed to ask, her challenging tone attempting to hide the terror that engulfed her. "I am the guardian of lost souls," the woman replied, her voice echoing as if from multiple dimensions. "Every young woman who has fallen into the grasp of this house belongs to me now. I am the reason you will never escape. This house is not just a place. It is an entity, a prison that feeds on pain and frustrated hope." "No, we will not give up," Emily declared, her spirit fighting against despair. "Catherine, we need to fight. We can't let her win." But before they could react, the woman extended her hand, and with a gesture, the shadows around them stirred, forming claws that lunged toward Emily and Catherine. The young woman felt the pressure of the shadows, as if they were trying to pull them into the ground. The screams of lost souls echoed around them, each carrying a story of pain and despair. Amidst the chaos, something inside Emily began to stir. The memories of the young women who had come before her, their hopes and dreams began to surface in her mind. She realized that true strength lay not only in her connection with Catherine, but also in the collective stories of these souls. They were not just victims, they were an army of voices crying out for freedom. "Listen to us," Emily shouted, her voice rising above the screams and turmoil. "You are not alone. We are here for you. Let's fight together." The shadows hesitated, and the veiled woman frowned. The energy around them began to change, and Emily realized that the light emanating from their hands had started to resonate with the voices of the lost souls. It was as if each story of pain and hope united into a chorus, creating a wave of power that challenged the oppression of the house. "You don't understand, girl," the guardian of souls shouted, her voice now full of rage. "You cannot escape what is destined to happen." But Emily did not back down. "We are not just victims, we are more than that, and together we can break this cycle." The light began to shine brightly, and the shadows writhed, trying to resist the growing power. Catherine, reinvigorated by Emily's determination, joined her. "Let's go, together!" she shouted, and the hands of the two intertwined more firmly. The energy intensified, forming a beam of light that shot toward the Guardian. But in an unexpected move, the woman unleashed a wave of darkness that collided with the light, creating an explosion of energy that made the house tremble violently. The walls began to crack, and the reality around them seemed to fade. "And now, the true face of horror will be revealed," the Guardian shouted, her wicked smile revealing sharp teeth. You have no idea what you are about to face. A new truth began to emerge, a revelation that could change everything. Emily felt that the fight was just beginning, and that whatever was to come would be more terrifying than anything she had ever faced. The tension mounted, and the future grew uncertain as the shadows around them clustered, promising a final confrontation that would challenge not only their lives, but the very essence of their souls. Chaos reverberated around Emily and Catherine as the shadows writhed like snakes, threatening to swallow them. The guardian of souls, with her wicked smile, seemed to absorb the energy of the house, and the tension in the air was palpable. Emily knew she needed to act quickly, but the oppressive force of the woman made her question her own choices. She had ventured into this fight believing she could free not only herself, but also the lost souls that the house imprisoned. However, as the dark presence intensified, a doubt began to corrode her determination. What if we can't? What if instead of freeing them, we only condemn them further, Emily thought, fear intertwining with her courage. Catherine, sensing her friend's hesitation, squeezed her hand tighter, as if wanting to transmit some of her own strength. Emily, we can't give up now. We have to find a way to defeat her, Catherine exclaimed, her voice brimming with determination, but there was a hint of doubt in her eyes. The Soul Guardian, sensing the weakness beginning to bloom between the two, advanced, her threatening presence making the ground tremble beneath her feet. Do you think you can challenge the fates that have already been drawn? Every attempt at resistance will only strengthen the prison that the house has created for you and for all the souls that reside here. Emily, still overcome with uncertainty, looked around, searching for a clue, anything that could help them. Then in the corner of the room, something caught her attention. An ancient tapestry hanging from the wall, its colors faded but still vibrant. It depicted the house itself, with figures of young people who seemed to scream in silence, their expressions reflecting the pain Emily felt in her heart. But there was more in the tapestry, a symbol, a mark that stood out among the others. "Catherine!" she shouted, pointing at the tapestry. "Look, that symbol. Maybe it's the key." Catherine's eyes lit up with hope, but the Soul Guardian was not willing to let them get distracted. With a swift motion, she unleashed a new wave of darkness toward them, the air filled with screams and whispers, the trapped souls crying out for help, and the pressure mounted as if the world itself was against them. "You have no idea what you are about to face," the Guardian shouted, and the room began to distort, as if reality itself was disintegrating around them. "We have to get to that symbol," Emily shouted, her voice resonating with renewed determination. She and Catherine began to move, their hands still intertwined, but feeling the strength of the shadows closing in around them. Each step they took felt like an act of courage, but also an invitation to despair. As they approached the tapestry, Emily felt a wave of energy enveloping her. It was as if the trapped souls there were trying to communicate with her, their stories intertwining into a single song of pain and hope. But at the same time, the presence of the Guardian grew stronger, her claws of darkness trying to pull them back. "Don't look back, Emily," Catherine shouted, noticing her friend's internal struggle. "Remember why we are here." But the truth began to weigh on Emily's heart. She recalled the stories she had heard, of souls that could not find rest. What she was about to do could mean their freedom, but it could also require a sacrifice she wasn't sure she could bear. What would happen if, in trying to save the others, she and Catherine became part of that tapestry, trapped forever? Still, the urgency pushed her forward. The shadows tugged at her, but the light emanating from their hands pulsed with the strength of the souls crying out for freedom. Emily turned to Catherine, a look of determination on her face. "Let's go together. We can't let fear take us. With one last effort, they reached the tapestry. Emily touched the symbol, and a shock of energy coursed through her body. The voices of the souls became a deafening clamor, and Emily felt a wave of emotions flood her. She saw flashes of the lives of the young people who had been trapped there, their dreams, their hopes, and their pains. That connection was intense, and Emily realized that the true fight was not just against the Guardian, but also against the despair that the house nurtured. "We are here for you!" Emily shouted, and the souls seemed to respond, their voices creating a chant that resonated throughout the house. The energy intensified, and the soul guardian began to hesitate, her eyes shining with rage and confusion. You can't change what has already been decided." But Emily would not be shaken. "We will not be just another part of your game. We will break this cycle." The tapestry began to glow, and the light emanating from it fused with that of Emily and Catherine. It was a pure energy, a force that defied the darkness. But in a desperate move, the Guardian unleashed a wave of shadows that crashed against the light, creating an explosion of energy that made the house tremble. Amidst the chaos, Emily realized that the true battle was just beginning, and that the choice they had to make was harder than any they had faced before. The future grew increasingly uncertain, and the fight for the freedom of the souls and for their own lives was a dance between light and shadow, hope and despair, where every decision could cost everything. The shadows writhed around Emily and Catherine as if the house itself were alive and reacting to the terror unfolding. The soul guardian, now angrier than before, began to emanate them from her presence, a darkness so dense it felt almost tangible. The ground beneath the two young women trembled, and the walls seemed to close in, making the environment claustrophobic. Emily felt her heart race, a mix of adrenaline and fear flooding her being. "We have to do this now," Catherine shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. But doubt continued to plague Emily, a persistent echo whispering in her mind. "What if we can't free them? What if we get trapped here forever?" The thought paralyzed her, like a snake slowly coiling around its prey. The Guardian herself seemed to sense her hesitation and smiled, a smile that was more a warning than a promise. "You cannot win against what you do not understand, girls." Her voice reverberated, echoing like thunder. "Here, the past and present merge. Every soul you try to save will become part of your own misery." Emily looked at Catherine, who was so determined, so brave. However, her eyes also carried a weight of uncertainty. Could it be that the Guardian was right? What if, in trying to save others, they condemned themselves? The weight of responsibility began to accumulate in her chest, and the thought of failing became almost unbearable. But there was something more, a voice inside her insisting that they could not give up. They were not just two ordinary girls, they were bearers of hope, and the tapestry before them was about to reveal its secret. Emily took a deep breath, trying to shake off the chill that enveloped her. "Catherine, we need to focus on the symbol. If we can activate it, maybe we can break the cycle." The determination in her voice was a disguised weakness, but Catherine nodded, her eyes shining with renewed determination. They approached the tapestry, feeling the energy pulse through the fabric, as if the trapped souls were writhing in response to their presence. The Guardian, realizing the direction the young women were taking, advanced with a roar of fury. "You have no idea what you are invoking. The truth you seek is a curse. You, just like the souls you wish to save, will never find peace." The shadows lunged toward them, like tentacles of a monstrous creature. Emily felt a wave of despair as she saw the darkness approaching, but then a thought crossed her mind. She had to face not only the external shadow, but also the internal shadow of her fears and insecurities. "Catherine, let's go together. We can't let her defeat us," Emily shouted, and the two joined forces, their hands intertwined once more. Light began to emanate from their hands, a flame of hope against the darkness. When Emily touched the symbol, a wave of energy coursed through her body. The voices of the souls began to whisper, their stories intertwining in a chorus of pain and desire for freedom. It was a call that pulsed in their hearts, a force that overcame fear and doubt. "We are here for you," Emily shouted, and the tapestry began to shine brightly. The light enveloped her, and a comforting warmth began to spread through her body. But the Guardian of Souls was not willing to surrender. She unleashed a new wave of darkness, a desperate attack aimed at silencing them. The room trembled with the force of the impact, and Emily felt her body being pushed back. The voices of the souls became a deafening clamor, and for a moment, hope seemed to fade away. Catherine's urgency and the Guardian's strength were at an impasse, and the space around them seemed to crumble. Emily closed her eyes, seeking calm amid the chaos. It was time to confront her own guilt, her own insecurities. "I can't let fear control me," she shouted to herself, and the light began to shine even more intensely. The shadows hesitated, as if the light were burning their essence. "Catherine, we need to unite our thoughts. Let's focus on their freedom," Emily exclaimed, and the determination in her voice echoed like a battle cry. The two concentrated, merging their energies and voices into a single cry. The tapestry vibrated, and the symbol began to pulse at a frantic rhythm. The souls began to manifest, the energy becoming almost palpable. The Guardian of Souls launched one last attack, a wave of darkness that seemed capable of swallowing everything. But with a united scream, Emily and Catherine touched the symbol again, and an explosion of light erupted, facing the darkness with a strength they did not know. The impact was colossal. The walls of the house trembled, and the very structure seemed to contort under the pressure. Emily felt the energy of the souls merge with hers, each bringing their stories, their hopes, and their sorrows. It was a deep connection, a bond that defied time itself. "Freedom!" they shouted in unison, and the light emanating from them expanded, breaking the chains of darkness. The Guardian of Souls, now surrounded by light, screamed in despair. "You can't do this. You can't change destiny." But Emily knew that the true battle was not only against the Guardian, but also against the weight of fear that had imprisoned them for so long. With one last effort, they directed the light toward the heart of the Guardian, what seemed to be the source of her evil. "We are here to free us all," Emily declared, and the light intensified, absorbing the darkness surrounding it. The house began to fade, and the souls, now free, danced around them, thanking them with a chorus of laughter and tears. But the fight was not over yet. The Guardian, in her last attempt to resist, let out a scream that echoed against the walls, a curse that promised to return. Emily and Catherine exchanged glances, aware that the battle was far from over. The future was uncertain, but in that moment the light had prevailed, and hope was reborn. The shadows intertwined, forming a shroud of darkness around Emily and Catherine as the Guardian of Souls rose, imposing and filled with fury. The atmosphere was charged, and the tension in the air was palpable. The light emanating from the girls' hands pulsed at a frantic rhythm, as if responding to the call of the freed souls dancing around them. The Guardian, a dark and enigmatic figure, cast a piercing gaze, her features twisted by rage. "Do you think you can challenge me? I am the Guardian of despair and pain. Every soul that dares to escape from me becomes part of the darkness again." Her voice resonated like thunder, and the house seemed to respond, trembling under the weight of her words. Emily, her heart pounding with adrenaline, refused to be daunted. She knew the moment to make a decision had come. "Catherine, we need to do this now. We can't let fear paralyze us." The determination in her voice mingled with the energy of the souls around them, fueling the light that grew in intensity. Catherine nodded, her eyes burning with courage. "Together, we can face this. We are not alone." The two young women joined their hands once more, and the light emanating from them intensified, forming a radiant barrier against the darkness surrounding them. The Guardian advanced, surrounded by shadows that seemed to gain a life of their own. You have no idea what you are invoking. Every step you take toward the truth will lead you to your own destruction. The air around them grew heavy, and the walls of the house began to close in, as if the very structure wanted to swallow them whole. Emily felt panic rising, but the voice of the souls became an encouraging whisper in her mind. We cannot be defeated. We have to fight. With a cry of determination, she directed the light at the Guardian. We will not allow you to control our destiny. The light expanded, illuminating every corner of the space, causing the shadows to hesitate. But the Guardian, in a final effort, unleashed a wave of darkness that seemed capable of swallowing everything. The walls cracked, and the ground beneath their feet shook with the force of the impact. Emily and Catherine were pushed back, feeling the pressure of the darkness tightening around them. No, we cannot give up, Emily shouted, closing her eyes for a moment, trying to find strength within herself. Catherine, let's focus. We need to unite our voices and our energies. The words flowed like a mantra, and when she opened her eyes again, Emily's gaze was filled with determination. The two young women began to chant, their voices intertwining in a powerful chorus. The tapestry pulsed with the energy of the souls, and the stories of pain and suffering began to weave together with their voices. The Guardian, realizing the strength that was growing, screamed in desperation. You have no power. I am the shadow that feeds on fear. But Emily knew that fear no longer controlled them. We are here to free all of us. The words were a battle cry, and the light began to shine even more intensely, enveloping the Guardian in a cloak of hope. The souls began to manifest, forming a legion of light around Emily and Catherine. Each one carried with it a story, a facet of the pain that had accumulated over time. The energy became almost palpable, and the house began to tremble under the pressure of the growing light. The Guardian launched one last attack, a wave of darkness that seemed destined to silence them forever. But with a unison shout, the two young women raised their hands, and the light burst forth in a blinding explosion, confronting the darkness with a force that defied logic itself. The impact was colossal. The house seemed to crumble around them, the walls shaking and the shadows retreating. Emily and Catherine felt the energy of the souls merge with their own, each bringing a fragment of hope, an echo of freedom. The light emanating from them expanded, absorbing the approaching darkness. Freedom! They shouted in unison, and the light intensified, enveloping the Guardian and causing her to hesitate. You cannot trap us anymore. The determination resonated in every word, and the essence of the Guardian began to fade under the strength of the light. But in a final act of desperation, the Guardian unleashed a curse that echoed through the walls of the house. You cannot change fate. My power will not be forgotten. Her form began to disintegrate, but the essence of evil still flickered like a distant star that refuses to go out. Emily and Catherine glanced at each other, the reality of the struggle unfolding before them. They knew that this battle could be just a temporary victory, but in that moment, the light had prevailed. The house, though damaged, began to restore itself, and the freed souls danced in an ecstasy of freedom. We cannot let it end here, Catherine said, her voice firm. We need to be the light that shines against the darkness. We must protect the souls that are still trapped. The determination in her eyes reflected the fight that still lay ahead. With the house now at peace, but with the shadow of the Guardian still present in their minds, Emily and Catherine prepared to face a new challenge. The battle may have ended, but the war against the darkness was far from over. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: they were not alone. Together they were an indomitable force, and hope was reborn amidst the chaos. The shadows finally began to dissipate, But the scars of the battle remained etched in the memories of Emily and Catherine. The light that had once surrounded them now became a soft glow around them, like a protective cloak that, though comforting, reminded them of the weight they carried. The house, still in ruins, now displayed a melancholic beauty, with the damaged walls telling the story of a fierce but triumphant struggle. Emily looked around, trying to absorb the scene. The echo of the Guardian's screams still reverberated in her mind, and the image of her furious gaze remained alive in her memory. It was not just the fight that had marked her. It was the presence of evil that she had felt. The experience left her with a sense of unease that could not be easily forgotten. The shadows that had once been mere illusions now seemed to take shape, a life of their own, and even in broad daylight, Emily knew that darkness was always lurking. Catherine, by her side, was visibly shaken. The emotional scars were evident in her eyes, which now displayed a depth of pain and wisdom that had not been there before. She had faced fear head-on, but the cost of victory had left her vulnerable. The memories of the souls that had been freed mingled with the weight of those still trapped, and the responsibility she felt was almost oppressive. "What do we do now?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "What happens to the souls that are still out there?" "We cannot forget about them," Emily replied, her own voice carrying the weight of what they had just faced. "We need to keep fighting. The battle may have been won, but the war is not over yet." The determination in her words was an attempt to anchor herself amid the turmoil of emotions. But deep down, she knew that the internal struggle was also fierce. What they had faced was not just a guardian of souls, but a representation of all the fears and traumas they carried. The way back home was silent, each step echoing the pain and struggle they had lived. The city, once familiar, now felt like a strange place. The streetlights flickered unsettlingly, and the shadows seemed to stretch in directions that defied logic. Emily felt she could never look at things the same way again. Normalcy had been irrevocably altered. The experiences she had lived made her wiser, but also lonelier. In the days that followed, they both tried to resume their lives. Emily began to avoid places that reminded her of home and the Guardian, but even the most common spaces were permeated by a sense of discomfort. She felt haunted by the echoes of the battle, by the souls still calling out for help. Dreams turned into nightmares, where the Guardian appeared amid a spiral of darkness, laughing at her helplessness. Each morning upon waking, she remembered that she was not the same. The struggle had left marks not only on her soul, but also on her body. A small cut on her arm, a result of the confrontation, became a symbol of her internal battle. Catherine, in turn, immersed herself in books and research about the supernatural, determined to understand what had happened more deeply. But each new discovery raised more questions than answers. The legends she studied now seemed more real than ever, and each pamphlet she found about mysterious disappearances or accounts of supernatural phenomena sent a chill down her spine. She had become a guardian of stories, but the emotional scars she carried kept her on the fringes of normalcy. One night while they were talking, Emily finally allowed herself to open her heart. "I can't stop thinking about the Guardian, about the echoes of pain she represented. What will happen to those still lost? What if she comes back?" The anguish in her voice was palpable, and Catherine, feeling her friend's pain, placed her hand over hers, a gesture of solidarity. "Maybe we will never have all the answers," Catherine replied, her voice soft. "But we know that the light we created together was powerful. We cannot let fear prevent us from moving forward. We need to be the voice for the souls that cannot speak." Her determination was a flame illuminating the darkness, but still, the weight of responsibility was a burden they both carried. The mystery of the house and the Guardian had been resolved, but the consequences were deep and lasting. They had become part of a much larger story, one that did not end with the defeat of an enemy. This battle was just a chapter in a narrative that stretched across generations, where the echoes of the past still called for justice. Emily and Catherine, although marked by the experience, decided not to be overcome by despair. Instead, they became defenders of the light, committed to protecting those still lost in the shadows. The future was uncertain, and the war against darkness was far from over, but together they found strength in friendship and hope. And even though the guardian of pain was far away, the shadow of her presence still lingered over them, a constant reminder that the fight for light would never end. The shadows of the battle that Emily and Catherine faced were not just remnants of a physical confrontation, but reflections of their own internal struggles and the emotional scars that had now become part of their essences. As they walked the path back to routine, each of them lost in their own thoughts. The experience had transformed them in ways they could barely understand. Emily felt a constant weight in her chest, a kind of anxiety that followed her like a persistent shadow. The fight against the Guardian of Souls had not just been a battle against an evil being. It had been a struggle against her own demons. The feeling of helplessness that enveloped her during the confrontation now manifested in her daily life, turning simple tasks into insurmountable mountains. Whenever she closed her eyes, the image of the Guardian materialized, and the cruel laughter echoed in her mind, like a distant echo that never completely faded away. She remembered the souls that had been freed, the light they burst forth when the Guardian was defeated, but at the same time, she felt the pain of those still trapped. The weight of responsibility was overwhelming. Emily wondered if she could truly make a difference. Would her efforts be enough to bring peace to those lost souls? The questions tormented her, and doubt became a vicious cycle that prevented her from moving forward. Catherine, on the other hand, had become a tireless researcher, diving into the legends and stories of the supernatural. Her desire to understand what had happened was a way to try to regain control over a reality that now seemed so fragile. But as she delved deeper into the legends, she realized that knowledge was not the same as understanding. Each new discovery about the supernatural world made her feel as if she were unearthing layers of a truth that could never be fully revealed. The stories, although fascinating, only left her more distressed. The darkness they faced was not an anomaly, but an intrinsic part of the human experience. At night, when the two gathered, the silence between them spoke louder than words could express. Both carried the weight of the battle, but each dealt with it differently. Emily sought solace in small things, trying to find joy in the memories of better times, while Catherine lost herself in the pages of books, searching for answers she might never find. As the days passed, what once seemed like an isolated struggle transformed into a shared journey. They began to support one another, recognizing that vulnerability was also a form of strength. The conversation that once was superficial now delved into the nuances of pain and hope. As they spoke about their experiences, their voices, once trembling, began to strengthen. If the struggle was theirs, they could also be the voices echoing the truth. One night, as they watched the stars shining in a clear sky, Catherine asked, "Have you ever wondered if all of this has a purpose? If the fight we wage is part of something greater?" Emily looked at the sky, reflecting on the fragility of life and the strength they had discovered within themselves. "I want to believe so, that each battle we face makes us stronger and more capable of helping those who are lost." And so, their journey was not just about the fight against the Guardian, but also about discovering how light could be found in darkness. They learned that, although the scars were permanent, they were also marks of resilience and courage. The experience united them, creating a bond that transcended pain and uncertainty. As life continued, Emily and Catherine became advocates for the souls still lost, committed to fighting against the darkness that threatened to engulf the world. They did not have all the answers, but they had the determination to continue the search. Deep within their souls, they knew that the struggle for light would never be easy. But together, they found renewed purpose. Emily and Catherine's journey might not have a clear ending, but there was beauty in the uncertainty. They were now part of a narrative that encompassed much more than just themselves. The impact of the battle they faced would resonate not only in their lives, but in the lives of all who crossed their path. Amid the echoes of pain and hope, they learned that true light shines brightest when shared, and that even in the darkest nights, there is always a chance to find a way back home. Emily and Catherine's struggle seemed to have reached a tipping point. They had become advocates for lost souls, but the shadow of the Guardian still loomed over them. One night, as they reviewed the accounts of their experiences, a disquieting feeling began to seep into their conversations. The echoes of victory were not as clear as they seemed. Each page Catherine turned seemed to bring forth a new strand of terror, a new possibility that the Guardian of Souls had not actually been defeated. One night, as the full moon illuminated the sky, Catherine decided to investigate an ancient library that, according to legends, housed dark secrets about the Guardian. Emily hesitated but accompanied her friend, drawn by the promise of answers. The library was a labyrinth of dusty books and dancing shadows, where time seemed to have stopped. As they explored, Catherine found a tome that spoke of the Guardian, but not as a mere entity to be defeated. The book suggested that the Guardian was a manifestation of a deeper, older force, one that fed on the fear and pain of souls. The fight they had waged might have only been a chapter in an endless cycle of darkness. "Catherine, are you saying that we may have just fed the beast?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. The horror of the revelation began to settle in her chest. Catherine, in turn, began to realize that the research was not just to understand, but also a way to prepare for a battle that might never end. At that moment, a chilling wind swept through the library, causing the pages of the books to flutter frantically. The lights began to flicker, and a sense of terror began to spread through the air. The two realized they were not alone. A malevolent presence seemed to be approaching, and the cruel laughter of the Guardian echoed off the ancient walls. "Emily!" Catherine shouted as a shadow formed at the entrance of the library. "We need to get out now." But the doors were locked. The darkness that had once seemed distant was now there, alive and pulsing. Emily and Catherine tried to move away from the shadow, but the library felt like an endless maze, constantly shifting as they moved. Terror became palpable, and the echoes of the lost souls they had tried to save began to whisper around them. "Do you think you can escape?" The voice of the Guardian sliced through the air like a sharp blade, and the two friends felt the pressure of fear intensify. "You freed me, and now you are part of me. Your struggle was in vain." In a moment of despair, Emily remembered the souls they had freed. "If you feed on fear, then we cannot let you control us," she shouted, but her voice sounded weak against the force that surrounded them. Catherine looked at the book, and an idea struck her. "If knowledge has power, perhaps we can reverse this." She began to recite a verse she had read, something about the light that could repel darkness. But the shadow was drawing closer, and the laughter of the Guardian grew louder. As Catherine spoke, the dark presence began to stir. What once seemed a path of hope quickly transformed into a nightmare. The souls they had freed were not just light. They were also the echoes of pain and suffering, and the Guardian fed on them, growing stronger and stronger. The connection that had been born between Emily and Catherine began to unravel under the pressure of terror. The two felt isolated, each fighting her own internal battle. Catherine, in her quest for understanding, had forgotten that knowledge could be a double-edged sword. The shadow enveloped them, and fear turned into despair. In the end, the library was not just a place of knowledge, but a portal to terror. The two friends, now separated by darkness, realized that the fight against the Guardian had not ended. In fact, it had only just begun. With one last scream, Emily found herself consumed by the shadow, while Catherine felt the force of darkness dragging through her being, leaving only a chilling sense of helplessness. Silence took over the library, and the whispers of lost souls became a deafening scream. The lights went out, and the darkness, now triumphant, enveloped everything. The struggle they had fought had become part of an eternal cycle, where light and darkness would dance forever, and the true battle would never end. The story of Emily and Catherine would become a legend, a warning for those who dared to seek the truth. The darkness, as always, was lurking, waiting for new souls to consume. Terror had not been defeated. It had merely changed form, ready to infiltrate innocent lives again, like a wolf disguised among sheep. And so, while the world moved on, many would continue to ignore the whispers of darkness, unaware that it awaited the next opportunity to manifest. The struggle of Emily and Catherine was a reminder that sometimes the greatest terror is not what we face, but what we leave behind. If you have ever felt the shadow approaching, if you have glimpsed the darkness lurking around the corners of life, share your story. Together we can bring to light what hides in the shadows. Like and subscribe so we can explore more about what dwells in the darkness around us. What will you do when the shadow comes for you?